This wasn't foreign policy. This wasn't diplomacy. This was the largest covert weapons transfer in a decade, executed under the cover of darkness, whilst the world focused on ceasefire negotiations in Gaza. And the timing is no accident. Whilst a massive armada steams toward Iranian waters, whilst President Trump threatens speed and violence against Iran, the administration just approved $15.67 billion in lethal hardware to two nations that sit on the front line of the coming storm. We have obtained the State Department notifications. We have tracked the carrier strike groups. We have uncovered the weapons manifest. And what we found reveals a war plan far more extensive than anyone imagined. Click the link. You must witness this before the bombs fall. Washington District of Columbia, January 31st, 2026. The Capitol woke this morning to revelations that would have dominated headlines for months in any rational era. But in the madness of the Trump administration's return to power, it barely registered a pulse. Late Friday evening, as Americans settled into weekend routines, the State Department released twin notifications to Congress that will reshape the Middle Eastern balance of power. Israel, $6.67 billion in offensive military equipment. Saudi Arabia, $9 billion in advanced missile defense systems. Combined, this represents the most substantial foreign military sale package approved since the final chaotic months of the Obama presidency, when similar deals sparked international condemnation and legislative investigations. But this is not a random sale. This is preparation for Armageddon, and Armageddon has coordinates: 32 degrees north, 53 degrees east. Tehran, Iran. To comprehend why this matters right now, in this precise moment of geopolitical peril, we must examine the chessboard upon which this deadly game is being played. The Trump administration has spent the last 4 weeks constructing what military strategists are calling the most dangerous confrontation since the Cuban Missile Crisis of 1962. Following the brutal suppression of Iranian protests that killed an estimated 6,373 civilians, according to credible human rights documentation, President Trump has threatened military intervention with language that even his own Pentagon advisors find deeply alarming. On January 28th, Trump posted to his Truth Social platform a declaration that sent tremors through every foreign ministry on earth. Quote, "A massive armada is heading to Iran. It is moving quickly with great power, enthusiasm, and purpose. Like with Venezuela, it is ready, willing, and able to rapidly fulfill its mission, with speed and violence if necessary." Unquote. Speed and violence. Those are not the words of measured deterrence. Those are the words of imminent military action. And now, barely 72 hours later, we discover that America's two most controversial Middle Eastern partners have just been granted access to an arsenal capable of fundamentally altering the entire region's strategic equilibrium. Coincidence? Absolutely not. Welcome back. What you are about to hear is a forensic deconstruction of the largest weapons transfer of the decade, executed under the shadow of impending warfare. We shall examine the specific hardware being delivered, the constitutional crisis brewing in Congress, the legal mechanisms being exploited, and the terrifying reality that this arsenal may not be for defensive purposes whatsoever. This is the $16 billion gamble on world war. Let us commence with the hardware itself, for the devil resides eternally in the details. The Israeli package totals $6.67 billion, meticulously divided into 4 distinct categories that tell a chilling story of offensive capability enhancement. First, 30 AH-64E Apache attack helicopters equipped with AGM-114 Hellfire missiles, M230 chain guns, and ASQ-170 advanced targeting acquisition designation systems. Total expenditure, $3.8 billion. These are categorically not defensive aircraft. The Apache is a precision strike platform, a tank killer, designed explicitly for deep penetration missions behind enemy defensive lines. Its operational range exceeds 300 miles when equipped with external fuel tanks, sufficient to reach critical Iranian military installations, nuclear research facilities, and command centers from Israeli territory or forward deployed positions. Second, 3,250 joint light tactical vehicles, essentially heavily armored troop transport trucks designed to move personnel and equipment across actively hostile terrain under fire. Cost: $1.98 billion. These vehicles are absolutely critical for sustained ground operations, particularly in environments where conventional road infrastructure has been systematically destroyed by preliminary aerial bombardment campaigns. The JLTV program represents the backbone of modern mechanized infantry deployment. Third, $740 million specifically allocated for advanced power packs to upgrade Israel's aging fleet of M113 armored personnel carriers that have been in continuous service since 2008. These are the engines that literally drive the machines of warfare, ensuring battlefield mobility during extended combat operations deep into enemy territory. Fourth, $150 million designated for an undisclosed quantity of light utility helicopters. The State Department's official notification deliberately omits the exact numerical quantity being transferred, a peculiarity that immediately raises substantial red flags among defense analysts. When government agencies deliberately obscure specific numbers in major arms transfer deals, it typically signals equipment with dual-use capabilities that could potentially violate established international legal norms if publicly acknowledged or scrutinized. But the Israeli package represents merely the appetizer. The main course is the Saudi Arabian deal. $9 billion exclusively for 730 advanced Patriot PAC-3 missiles and associated and /MPQ 65 radar detection systems, fire control command units, mobile launcher platforms, and comprehensive 10-year maintenance service contracts. The Patriot system constitutes America's premier theater-level air defense platform, specifically engineered to intercept incoming ballistic missiles and hostile aircraft at extreme high altitude before they can reach protected targets. Why precisely does Saudi Arabia require this particular capability enhancement at this exact moment in history? The answer lies 30 miles directly across the Persian Gulf waters. Iran possesses one of the most sophisticated and extensive ballistic missile arsenals anywhere in the developing world, with documented strike ranges exceeding 2,000 kilometers, sufficient to target American military installations, Saudi oil infrastructure, and Israeli population centers simultaneously. During escalating tensions on January 28th, Iranian military spokesman Brigadier General Abolfazl Shakarki issued an ominous public warning. Quote, "Numerous American military assets currently deployed in the Gulf region exist within effective range of our medium-range precision-guided missiles and advanced unmanned aerial vehicle systems." Unquote. This was not mere rhetorical posturing. This was a calculated threat assessment. According to classified Pentagon estimates leaked to defense journalists, over 30,000 American military personnel are currently stationed across 8 major installations throughout the Middle Eastern theater of operations. Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar, Prince Sultan Air Base in Saudi Arabia, multiple naval facilities throughout Bahrain, all exist within Iranian strike capability. The Patriot deployment to Saudi Arabia is not about protecting Saudi citizens. It is about protecting American forces and maintaining operational readiness for offensive action against Tehran. Let us examine the constitutional crisis this sale has detonated in Washington. Under existing American law, specifically the Arms Export Control Act of 1976, Congress possesses explicit authority to review and potentially block major foreign military sales through joint resolutions of disapproval. The notification period is statutorily mandated at 30 calendar days for NATO allies and major non-NATO allies. For Israel, this period was deliberately shortened to 15 days through special legislative carve-outs. For Saudi Arabia, it remains at the full 30-day review window, But here is where the Trump administration executed a masterful procedural maneuver that effectively neutered congressional oversight. The notifications were submitted to Congress at precisely 4:47 post-meridian Eastern Standard Time on Friday, January 30th. This timing was absolutely not accidental. By releasing the notifications late on Friday afternoon, the administration guaranteed that the 15-day and 30-day clocks commence ticking over a weekend when most congressional offices operate with skeleton staffing. Furthermore, the submission occurred during a congressional recess period, meaning lawmakers are scattered across their home districts rather than concentrated in Washington, where they could coordinate rapid opposition. Senator Chris Van Hollen of Maryland, a vocal critic of unconditional military support to both Israel and Saudi Arabia, issued a scathing statement within hours of the notification becoming public. Quote, "This administration deliberately chose the Friday afternoon news dump to slide $15.67 billion in weapons to regimes currently engaged in potential war crimes, knowing full well that Congress would be powerless to mount effective resistance during a recess period. This is constitutional contempt." Unquote. Van Hollen is factually correct. Even if progressive Democrats and libertarian Republicans assembled sufficient votes to pass a joint resolution of disapproval, which historically has proven extraordinarily difficult given the powerful pro-Israel and pro-Saudi lobbies in Washington, President Trump would simply veto that resolution. Overriding a presidential veto requires a 2/3 supermajority in both legislative chambers, a mathematical impossibility given current partisan alignments. The administration knows this. They calculated it precisely. They are banking on congressional impotence, whilst they arm two nations on the precipice of regional conflagration. But the constitutional crisis extends far deeper than mere procedural gamesmanship. There exists substantial legal debate regarding whether these sales violate existing American statutory law, specifically the Leahy Law amendments, which prohibit military assistance to foreign security forces credibly accused of gross human rights violations. Israel's conduct in Gaza since October 7, 2023 has been documented extensively by international human rights organizations. Amnesty International released findings in December 2025, concluding that Israeli military operations constituted acts fitting the legal definition of genocide under the Genocide Convention of 1948. Human Rights Watch documented systematic targeting of civilian infrastructure, including hospitals, schools, and refugee shelters, in violation of the Geneva Convention's protections for non-combatants. The International Criminal Court issued arrest warrants in November 2025 for Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and former Defense Minister Yoav Gallant on charges of crimes against humanity and war crimes. Under strict interpretation of the Leahy Law, these documented violations should trigger an immediate suspension of American military assistance, pending credible investigations and accountability measures. Yet the Trump administration has not merely maintained existing military aid pipelines. They have dramatically expanded them at the precise moment when legal and moral scrutiny has reached its zenith. The Saudi record is equally damning. The kingdom's military intervention in Yemen since 2015 has resulted in an estimated 377,000 deaths, according to United Nations estimates. The overwhelming majority civilians killed by indiscriminate aerial bombardment campaigns utilizing American-manufactured aircraft, dropping American-manufactured munitions. The 2018 murder and dismemberment of journalist Jamal Khashoggi inside the Saudi consulate in Istanbul, an operation that American intelligence agencies conclusively attributed to Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman's direct authorization, should have permanently severed American willingness to provide advanced weaponry to Riyadh. Instead, we are witnessing the largest single Saudi arms purchase in over a decade. Legal scholar and former State Department official John Bellinger III stated in an interview with Foreign Policy magazine, The administration is exploiting deliberate ambiguities in the statutory language of the Leahy Law and Arms Export Control Act to push through sales that would never survive rigorous legal scrutiny in a functioning constitutional system. They are gambling that by the time courts could intervene, the weapons will already be delivered and deployed. This brings us to the most terrifying dimension of this entire affair: the timeline of potential warfare. Intelligence analysts tracking the movements of the USS Abraham Lincoln Carrier Strike Group and USS Harry S. Truman Carrier Strike Group report both battle groups have entered the Arabian Sea and are rapidly approaching operational strike positions off the Iranian coastline. Flight operations from carrier decks typically commence within 12 to 18 hours of reaching station. That suggests strike capability will be fully operational by February 2nd or 3rd at the absolute latest. Simultaneously, B-52 Stratofortress strategic bombers from the 5th Bomb Wing at Minot Air Force Base, North Dakota, have been forward deployed to undisclosed locations in the Middle Eastern theater, almost certainly either Al Udeid or Diego Garcia. The B-52 carries the GBU-57 massive ordnance penetrator, the only conventional weapon in the American arsenal capable of destroying deeply buried Iranian nuclear enrichment facilities at Fordow and Natanz. The deployment of MOP-capable bombers is not a deterrent signal. It is a strike preparation. When we overlay the weapons sales timeline with the military deployment timeline, a disturbing pattern crystallizes. The Apache helicopters will not arrive in Israel for approximately 8 to 12 months, given manufacturing, lead times, and delivery logistics. The Patriot missiles destined for Saudi Arabia will require similar timeframes for production and installation. These weapons will not be available for any immediate conflict with Iran. So why approve them now? Because the administration is planning for what comes after the initial strikes. They are preparing Israel and Saudi Arabia for a sustained regional war that could extend for years, not weeks. The hardware being approved today is not for the opening salvo. It is for the grinding occupation, the insurgency suppression, the long twilight struggle that inevitably follows regime change operations. This is the Venezuela model applied to a nation of 85 million people with advanced military capabilities and profound religious and geopolitical significance. If the United States strikes Iranian nuclear facilities and attempts to install a new government in Tehran, as Trump has repeatedly suggested, the entire Middle East will erupt into a conflict that makes the Iraq and Afghanistan wars appear minor by comparison. Israel will face Hezbollah retaliation from Lebanon equipped with an estimated 150,000 rockets and missiles. Saudi Arabia will confront Houthi attacks from Yemen, intensifying beyond current levels. American forces scattered across the region will become targets for Iranian proxy militias operating in Iraq, Syria, and throughout the Gulf states. And into this maelstrom, the Trump administration is now pouring $15.67 billion in lethal hardware. The public justification offered by State Department spokesman Vedant Patel was almost comically inadequate. Quote, "These sales will support the foreign policy goals and national security objectives of the United States by improving the security of valued partners that continue to be important forces for political stability and economic progress in the Middle East." Unquote. Political stability. The Middle East is currently experiencing its most severe destabilization since the Arab Spring of 2011. Economic progress. The regional economy is teetering on the brink of collapse as oil prices fluctuate wildly and investment capital flees towards safer havens. This is Orwellian doublespeak of the highest order. The administration is not promoting stability. They are accelerating chaos whilst ensuring their preferred clients possess sufficient firepower to survive the coming storm. Let us examine what opposition exists, for it is notably muted. Progressive Democrats like Senator Bernie Sanders and Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez have condemned the sales in characteristically strong language. Sanders posted, "Sending billions in weapons to governments actively committing war crimes while American families struggle to afford health care is a moral abomination." Unquote. But condemnation without action is merely performance. The progressive wing lacks sufficient votes to block anything in the current Congress. Meanwhile, traditional Republican hawks like Senator Lindsey Graham have enthusiastically endorsed the weapons transfers. Graham stated, "Israel and Saudi Arabia are our frontline partners against Iranian aggression. We should be doubling this arsenal, not questioning it." Unquote. The only meaningful opposition could theoretically emerge from libertarian Republicans concerned about executive overreach and fiscal responsibility. Senator Rand Paul has historically opposed arms sales to Saudi Arabia on constitutional grounds. But Paul's influence within his own party has waned substantially, and there is zero indication he can assemble a blocking coalition, which means these sales will proceed. The weapons will be manufactured. They will be shipped. They will be deployed. And when the shooting starts, American-made missiles will rain down on Iranian positions launched from American-made aircraft, guided by American-made targeting systems, operated by pilots trained in American military academies. The plausible deniability that allowed previous administrations to maintain arm's length distance from partner nation military operations has evaporated entirely. This will be an American war in everything but official declaration. We are monitoring carrier positions hourly. We are tracking congressional maneuvering daily. We are documenting every weapons shipment, every legal challenge, every diplomatic protest. Because what we are witnessing is not merely an arms sale. It is the final preparation for a war that could reshape the entire global order. The carriers are in position. The bombers are fueled. The weapons are approved. All that remains is the order. And if Venezuela taught us anything, it is that this administration does not hesitate when the president decides to pull the trigger. The $16 billion arsenal is not about defense. It is about the aftermath. It is about ensuring that when the dust settles and the bodies are counted, America's partners in the region possess sufficient military superiority to control whatever emerges from the ruins of the Islamic Republic. This is the plan. This is the gamble. This is the point of no return. We are tracking every development in real time. If you want to stay ahead of the mainstream media blackout on this crisis, subscribe now and enable notifications. The missiles are loaded. The timers are counting down. And the world is about to discover whether Trump's speed and violence rhetoric was bluster or prophecy. This is history accelerating toward catastrophe.